Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. That was such an informative session with so many enlightening points. The panelists definitely highlighted the importance of businesses adopting sustainable and circular business models and goals and targets that they have set, and how they attempt to include both their value chain and their clients. And they also touched upon the challenges that they often face and the roles that they as organizations could play in helping to mitigate the effect of global warming. I think it's also very safe to say that almost all the leading businesses in India have set similar intentions, and I'm very confident that with their support, India will be on its way to meeting its emission reduction goals. So thank you, panelists, for that incredible session. So, as we know, there is an ever increasing demand for transparency around corporate action from a multitude of stakeholders. Consumers and investors are increasingly cautious of greenwashing and goodwashing. And it is in this context that sustainability reporting has gone beyond being just a tick in the box. Whether it's done for compliance or voluntarily, it influences consumer choices, investor choices, employee choices, and supplier choices. Taking this topic forward, we have our next panel on the growing relevance of sustainability reporting. We have with us Dr. Aditi Haldar, Director, Global Reporting Initiative. Dr. Haldar is an expert on sustainable development with over 25 years of work experience. Currently, in her role as the Director of GRI South Asia, she advocates the mainstreaming of measurement, management, reporting, and public transparency of ESG information to create trustworthy market and societal conditions. Our next panelist, Ms. Prarthana Borah, is the Director of India CDP. She has over 25 years of experience in strategy planning and program leadership. She is a sector expert in air quality and climate change, biodiversity conservation, and education for sustainable development. This panel is a truly women-empowered one, with our next panelist being Dr. Divya Sharma, Executive Director, Climate Group. Dr. Sharma is an international consultant on urban policy and planning, urban infrastructure, and climate resilience with an overall experience of over 18 years. She possesses excellent regional knowledge across climate change domain, including adaptation and mitigation, and international dialogues pertinent to the same. Our last panelist completing the quorum is Mr. Kumar Swami Chandrasekhar, Vice President and Head of Sustainability, DSI Group India Private Limited. Mr. Chandrasekhar comes with over 32 years of work experience, comprising 11 years in the chemical process industry in fields of manufacturing, technical services, and process design, 21 years as a third-party auditor, assessor, validator, verifier, and trainer. He has been a member of the global leadership team for climate change services in DNV for 4 years. Bringing his expertise on the topic, we have with us Mr. Anveshi Gatta, CEO at Adquest Sustainable Solutions Private Limited. Mr. Gutta has industry experience of over 19 years in the IT consulting and social impact space. Today, he drives corporate sustainability, climate tech, climate education, and ESG strategies through his venture Adquest. I'm sure that with such heavyweights taking over the reins, the discussion ought to be captivating. Over to you, Mr. Gutta.
Thanks, Aditi. Thanks for that introduction. The topic, growing relevance of sustainability reporting. I mean, sustainability reporting is going through a facelift today. There's a renewed spotlight on it. In fact, there are ongoing efforts to aggregate sustainability reporting standards and frameworks through the recently announced ISSB. There's growing demand for synchronization between financial and non-financial reports, which is annual reports and sustainability reports, in other words. There are regulations like the BRSR in India, the EU taxonomy, and the CSRP in the UK, in the EU, that are knocking on the doors. It is in this backdrop that the discussion today with my co-panelists here gathers its significance. Let's start with some opening statements from each of the panelists, and then that will help us take the conversation further. In no particular order, let me start with Dr. Aditi Haldar, so that we hear from you for the next 2 minutes, just to understand what's your take on the whole aspect of sustainability reporting, and we'll take it forward from there. Dr. Haldar.
Yeah, hi, thank you very much. Am I audible?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So I am Aditi, as Avneshi, announced, and it's great to be here in this forum with NASSCOM and the Center of Excellence. As you know, GRI is a global and international organization, and we are an independent organization. Although our headquarter is based out of Netherlands, but we are very much an independent how can we, meaning GRI, creates the global common language for organizations to report their impacts. This enables informed dialogue and decision making around these impacts. So GRI envisions a sustainable future enabled by transparency and open dialogue about impacts, and the future in which reporting on impacts can become a common practice by all organizations around the world. Seems for that as a standard setter for impact reporting, we follow an independent multi-stakeholder process, and as you may know that the GRI standard is a public good. So there is no commercial transaction which happens by using the GRI standard. And we are very proud that we are working in several economies with different dimensions and different dynamics, and the government, policymakers, regulators, investors, businesses, academia, labor organizations, they are all there as part of our strong 30,000 institutions to understand the implication of sustainability reporting and how the GRI standard can provide every organization, whether it is a report preparer or a report user, to refer to this common language of sustainability and transparency. Over to Avdeshi. Thank you.
Thanks, Dr. Aditi. That was very helpful. While we were listening in, I think there seems to be some sort of a technical issue at your end. Maybe you could sort it out while we move on to the other panelists. I'll come over to you, Prarthana. Prarthana, if you could bring in your perspective on sustainability reporting, the way CDP sees it, and that'll help us take this forward.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. And thank you for inviting me to be part of this panel. So before I go into what CDP does, I think what I want to actually start with saying that, climate change is real and we are all getting very conscious of it. And just, if you look at just the past panel, it was so nice to see so many CEOs actually talking about action for climate change. So I think sustainability reporting and disclosure is here to stay. It is a win-win situation for companies to report and disclose, because ultimately it is about good business. It is about less costs and it's about reputation. So I think from that perspective, disclosure is something that is going to be the future in terms of not just reporting, but in terms of also gauging and assessing as well as active action on the ground in terms of climate impact. So from that perspective, I think at CDP, what we want to do is provide the scientific base plus comparative base in terms of how to use data and how do you actually account for what you're doing in the production space. So this is the background. And at CDP, what we do is we help companies disclose in three areas in terms of what is the climate impact, what is their impact on water security, and how are they contributing to conservation of forests. So these are the three areas where we look at company disclosing in terms of data, and also providing the forum to have a comparative with other companies. So we have a scoring mechanism which actually positions companies on a scale from A to F. So basically, one company can learn from the other in terms of where it stands in terms of the other company, and also learn about good practices, innovations, and climate mitigation from others. So that is where I come from. Thank you.
That's wonderful. Thanks, Prarthana. And I believe the ecosystem that is building over years that I've noticed with CDP, the number of companies only keep growing year after year. So which is a very encouraging sign for everyone in this space. So that's a very good positive to take into consideration. Yeah. So with that said, I'll move on to our next panelist, Dr. Divya Sharma. If you could come in and share your views on sustainability reporting, also through the lens of the climate group, which does a lot of mission programs that we are all aware of. So please take the floor.
Thank you, Anveshi. Many thanks for having me here. Am I audible? Is it fine?
Yes.
Great. Good evening to all those who are present and glad to be part of this esteemed panel today. I will very quickly introduce Climate Group. Climate Group is an international NGO with offices in US, India, headquartered in UK. We also have office in China and a new one in Europe. Our mission is to drive climate action fast. And our goal is a world of net zero carbon emissions by 2050 with greater prosperity for all. That said, we focus on systems with the highest emissions and where our networks have the greatest opportunity to drive change. We do this by building large and influential networks and holding organizations accountable, turning their commitments into action. We share what we achieve together to show more organizations what they could do. And in a way, reporting is an essential element to the commitments that businesses take when they come together with us, with our initiatives. So forward-looking businesses, experts from the industry and senior leadership from policy acknowledge and understand the critical role of corporate climate action in India at the moment, particularly on the path of net zero. Furthermore, voluntary action by businesses will help India achieve its NDCs by 2030. And it's a daunting task, we must agree. So our endeavor is that we work through our 100 campaigns, which is called RE100, EP100, EV100, and now Steel Zero, allow companies to publicly commit to doing their part for the energy transition by switching to renewable electricity, investing on energy productivity, and adopting electric vehicles. These campaigns with clear mandates can become a powerful tool in companies' sustainability reporting process also. So coming from commitments, taking actions and reporting, this is the route basically, which gives us a fair insight on the performance of businesses on these initiatives and the action that they are taking after the commitments that they had got into. We get this analysis of performance by regions when we look at the reports and how companies acknowledge their work. Because these are also global initiatives, we know what regions are faring and how they are doing. And by these endeavor and by these conversations and through these platforms that we have provided through our campaigns, we can also understand the barriers and challenges. The forums that these initiatives provide help us to generate critical mass to be able to inform policy as well, or at least bring businesses and government together to influence future policies. So that is the potential of these initiatives that we are working with.
Perfect. So we'll definitely have a question or two just on that very topic, because I think setting the ambition right is a very important aspect of doing the longer roadmap of sustainability reporting, let's say.
Absolutely.
So I'm definitely going to come to you with some queries as we progress into the discussion. Let me move on to Mr. Kumar Swami Chandrasekhar, veteran in this space. So definitely somebody from whom we want to hear his views on this whole aspect of sustainability reporting and also the whole climate neutrality aspect at large. So over to you, Mr. Chandrasekhar.
Yeah. Thank you, Anveshi, and a very good afternoon to all of you. I represent the British Standards Institution, a company headquartered in UK, founded in the year 1901. And since 1901 and until today, and even in the future, one of our primary activities has been coming up with the world's requirements on management system standards. You must have heard about ISO 9001, ISO 14001, the one on quality management systems, environment management systems, and several such ISO standards. Much of these standards originally was brought out by BSI, And once it became popular, the ISO Council took over and then gave it an ISO tag. So we have been in this business of coming up with the standards right from 1901. And having said that, not only do we come up with the world's requirements and standards, but we also do a whole lot of training and capacity building to enable organizations actually interpret and implement these management system standards effectively. And naturally, following this effective implementations, we also do a whole lot of verifications, validations, assessments, and audits, and then award certificates to the company and ensure that over a period of time, through periodical surveillance audits, the continual improvement happens. So this is by and large what we do. Having said that, to be a little more precise, we help develop standards and standardization solutions to meet the needs of the business and society, and actively support clients and organizations to advocate best practice. What is important is these standards actually advocate best practices for organizations to take note of and implement, champion sustainability, and boost organizational resilience. And over the years, we've developed expertise and shared best practices in the areas of environmental management, waste management, greenhouse gas emissions management, pollution management, and many other areas of interest in the field of sustainability. And it's just not sustainability per se. We are also into performance management improvement. We are in the areas of risk management and the whole lot of these. And finally, as a bottom line, all I would like to say is sustainability strategy, and sustainability reporting on the performance periodically by the organizations is here to stay, and it is indeed the need of the hour.
Can't agree more, Mr. Chandrasekhar. That's absolutely true. In fact, with the kind of expertise that this panel brings to the table, I'm sure we're covering pretty much every phase of a life cycle, let's call it so, of a corporate sustainability agenda. So it's very wonderful to have that diversity in this panel. So let's jump into the conversation, take this conversation to the next level. Maybe I'll start with Dr. Divya Sharma, because that's something that is interesting when we talk of commitments. And so sustainability reports, we know they capture the story of the firm's actions in the preceding period. But our experience in this regard has been that for the story to demonstrate ambition, responsibility, impact, it's important to look at where it all begins, which is exactly at the commitment phase, the business commitment phase. So Climate Group, like you mentioned in your introductory remarks, has a lot of programs around EV100, RE100, EP100, which look at that particular commitment coming out in the open. So could you elaborate on this observations that you would have made in this regard about how these pledges can be translated to real action on the ground? They don't remain just pledges on paper.
Thank you, Anveshi. I think that's a brilliant question, and I like the way you framed this question. So spot on. To begin with, Climate Group's campaigns are not just pledges. These are absolute commitments that forward-looking businesses have taken up and involves 100% transition over the target year. Overall, more than 500 major global companies are actively reducing their emissions by making a commitment around at least one of Climate Group's initiatives or commitments, as you say. Over 345 members of RE100, for example, have pledged to power 100% of their operation with renewable electricity, representing over 350 terawatt hours of annual energy consumption. Similarly, our EP100 initiative campaign is a network of over 125 companies committed to improving their energy productivity. And in EV100 campaign, over 110 corporates have committed to transitioning more than 5 million vehicles and installing charging stations at more than 7,000 properties around the world. So I'm giving these numbers because it kind of tells us how these pledges are being translated into actions. And there are numbers that we speak of, which actually tell us about the impact that is being created. Now, all these initiatives, all 4 initiatives of Climate Group have helped companies develop early benchmarks and establish common standards for sustainability reporting. So from benchmark to reporting, and in between the action that is taken, there's a whole lot of, service area that is, taking place. And several of our members are keen to share knowledge and inspire others to act as well. And we give them that platform. In partnership with CDP, we publish our annual disclosure reports that guide our future work as well as help us ascertain impact of these initiatives, as I said earlier. And these reports present the data behind the initiative, holding it and its member accountable by showing how they are putting their commitments into action. I'll give you an example of RE100 campaign. The data demonstrate the scale of demand and the pivotal role that corporations play in increasing renewable electricity capacity and also opening access to renewable electricity in new markets. So data from our recent RE100 annual disclosure report with CDP helps us recognize many important findings. For example, it tells us that RE100 member, now 349 companies, consume more electricity combined than the entire UK annually, and are sourcing nearly 45% of their electricity needs through renewable electricity already. And this is a pathway that we can see where they are heading to. So it's not only impact, it's also a roadmap that we can see, a futuristic one definitely. So you see, we can ascertain region-wise progress and also challenges and barriers. And likewise, we have data, we have understanding from the performance of businesses who are part of our initiatives. Thank you.
It's really heartening to see some real stories that you gave us. I mean, that's exactly the kind of thing that we want to hear in these times when greenwashing is kind of also taking up some of the headlines out there. So there is definitely some positive real action happening, and that's heartening. Talking of commitments and taking that conversation a little further, these days the private sector is buzzing with net zero commitments. We've seen corporate leaders that have started to act on these commitments with near-term, mid-term, long-term roadmaps. These are the ones that have led the charter at this point. Again, I'll come to you, Mr. Chandrasekhar. BSI, I know, plays a leading role in ensuring conformance to various standards that help these corporates along the way, including something around the lines of PAS 2050, PAS 2060. These are growing in relevance as well. Could you please throw some light on the need to confirm a strong alignment between these commitments and action? How do you kind of make that real alignment happen?
Yeah, thank you, Anveshi. Let me put it this way. Climate change has been triggered by increasing levels of greenhouse gas concentrations in the atmosphere, resulting in harmful global warming. And to address this problem, and like many other countries, at the recently concluded summit in Glasgow, Scotland, India too committed to a net zero carbon emissions target by 2070. Put simply, net zero, also referred to as carbon neutrality in general, means we are not adding new emissions to the atmosphere. Emissions will continue, but will be balanced by absorbing an equivalent amount from the atmosphere. Now, as more companies step up on climate change, set targets, and jump on this so-called net zero bandwagon, clearly there is one thing that is missing. Strategies and actions to reduce carbon footprints and eventually demonstrate carbon neutrality. The questions that typically follow are, why is there such a large gap between intention, commitment, and action? What should one do to implement and track performance? Organizations are also finding the question, how best can I become carbon neutral? Very difficult to answer. And to address these questions specifically, organizations like BSI actually come into the picture into this space. And as I said a little while ago, BSI helps develop standards and standardized solutions to meet the needs of the business and society, and actively supports clients and organizations to advocate best practices. And through these standards, we give direction to the company. And for example, PAS 2060, the publicly available specification 2060 on carbon neutrality. It's a best practice standard, clearly requiring organizations to come up with a strategy on neutrality over a period of time. It's not something that you can do overnight, just like that. It needs time, it needs planning, it needs resources, and needs to be demonstrated over a period of time. And having said that, these standards actually very clearly advocate and tell companies how to quantify. What are the methods that one could adopt? How do you achieve these reductions over a period of time? You rightly said, many companies have short-term goals and long-term targets, but they lack the vision, they lack the direction towards achieving that. And these standards like PAS 2060 actually help organization towards this goal. And how do you actually offset this? What credible mechanism should organizations adopt? Is it the CDM mechanism? Is it the JI mechanism? Is it the voluntary carbon standards, the gold standards? So what are those credible standards which are typically seen as acceptable by the stakeholder fraternity? These are advocated in these publicly available standards, that is PAS 2060. And as an organization, one can do more than claim their businesses to be carbon neutral. You can give these claims credibility with the internationally accepted standard, as I told you, PAS 2060. This standard, for example, very specifically sets out the requirements for achieving and demonstrating carbon neutrality, allowing you to improve your environmental credentials with accuracy and transparency. And coupled with the carbon footprint verification that BSI also does, it is sort of becoming fundamental to provide credibility. It reassures a whole lot of stakeholders, be it the regulators, be it the customers, the employees, shareholders, potential investors, environmental groups, the media, a whole lot of them, and assures them of the integrity, the completeness, and the transparency of these carbon footprint verifications. And any organization that is actively measuring or establishing the procedures to arrive at its carbon footprint, irrespective of size, industry, or location, can and will benefit from the additional rigor and expertise that these CFC processes brings in through the implementation of these standard requirements. So clearly, standards such as PAS 2050, which is on product carbon footprinting, PAS 2060 on neutrality, ISO 14064, which is on your organization carbon footprinting, will help organizations to adapt, transform, strategize, implement, communicate sustainability performance, and better allocate resources. That's how I see it.
That's wonderful. In fact, as you kept speaking, the one word that kept ringing in my mind is accountability. There's got to be that accountability through and through, whether it's in the form of the fact that you've got a checklist and audit that's going to be audited against, whether it's in terms of measurement, whichever way you look at it. That's important at this end, when stakeholders are getting so very interested in what a corporate is doing truly on sustainability. So there's of course, that kind of moves me to the next query, which is essentially around the fact that the shareholder centricity is gradually shifting to stakeholder centricity these days, and sustainability reporting in that very context has gained a lot of prominence. There's regulations, of course, that are coming in, like I mentioned earlier, BRSR, EU taxonomy. Because of which there's a call for clear, transparent, consistent, holistic reporting at regular intervals. Now, GRI, we've heard earlier, GRI has been a leader in sustainability reporting space for years now, much before these regulations even came in. So my question, Dr. Aditi, is how do you see the emergence of sustainability reporting over the years, and what do you think would be a future outlook for reporting in your own perspective?
Yeah. Okay, thank you, Nishi. Am I audible now? I think
yes,
my voice was breaking a bit. Yeah. So 25 years have gone by, that GRI is in the market, and we started by looking at only making the businesses become part of the journey of imbibing sustainability reporting as equivalent of financial reporting. But it took time because GRI tried to create the ecosystem. And the ecosystem got only created by creating the demand for sustainability reporting. So in the beginning, I was also part of that group in the 2001, 2, 3, and so on. where the stakeholders who contributed to the GRI guidelines development and the improvement and going on to the standard, they said, no, we are not going to engage with governments and policymakers. However, that scenario has completely changed, and both the GRI fraternity and the different stakeholders realize that unless the policymakers come in, nothing will change, because to an extent, reporting from voluntary nature, it has to
We seem to be having an issue with Dr. Aditi's network. I'll probably...
Yeah, can you hear me now? I'm switching so that is more
maybe
clear.
That'll help. Yeah, please, let's try that. Yeah.
Okay.
Sure.
So I just finished quickly, and I'm sorry about this internet connection. So the thing is that the voluntary part is still there, because business and promoters, business promoters, they know where the risks and opportunities are. It's just that the smart organizations realizes that the investors also are very keen to understand where the risks and opportunities are. So sustainability reporting is the process of measuring, managing, changing, and disclosing. But unfortunately, the communication part becomes very important. So even if a company is, measuring, managing, and changing, at the end, what happens in the boardroom generally is that the communication part becomes more important than everything else. And the key risks and opportunities then become hidden. So my, I think opinion and perspective, or, I think my understanding so far has been that this is there, but it is changing now, because businesses are beginning to see that reporting is not about waiting to be reactive and waiting for a policymaker or a regulator to show a stick, but it is also about carrots, and the GRI standard remains to be very, very, I think, engaging with the different changes that is happening. For example, the IFRS, where they have created the ISSB, and they are looking at investors' demand and what is the financial implication of sustainability impacts to an enterprise. If we look at the European Union and their, sustainability reporting standard, GRI got invited to become the co-constructor, and the ESRS, when it will come out, it will actually influence 50,000 companies. And then imagine all the supply chain which are based out of countries like ours, where the implication of sustainability reporting and disclosure will not become a regulation, but also become a code of conduct. Because if the business wants to do good business and long-term business, they have to start disclosing. There is no way out. And the other trend I see here, which is my last one, is that traceability is becoming very important. So every product or services which is manufactured, created, and is being marketed for any kind of financial implication will be demanded or expected to understand what are the environmental and social issues which are tied to that manufacturing and the service delivery. So if traceability becomes important, then we are sure that reporting will be very important down the line. There is no way out for us. Yes, Avnish.
Thanks, Dr. Aditi. I think the fact that it's not just about regulations making us do it, the fact that it's actually something that makes true business sense, good business sense, like you put it, is the underlying point. I mean, that's how it's got to be understood. If you were to only wait for the stick, like you said it, then things are just being done to get that tick in the box, which is no longer the way to look at it. taking that a step further from reporting would be essentially what Prarthana mentioned CDP does, benchmarking. And that's a very interesting aspect, which definitely kind of puts it in black and white in terms of where you really stand in the overall picture. So CDP manages what we know as one of the most widely adopted sustainability disclosure platforms, and that's globally. It also invests significant resources to assess those reports that are submitted, benchmarks companies based on their inputs across different parameters. So my question here, Prarthana, would be on the lines of how important are these annual disclosures and benchmarking exercises for stakeholders to build what we all would want to call an informed view of a particular corporate? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, thank you. And I'm going to continue from where Aditi left off, because I think she spoke very, very strongly about the fact that, reporting is not just here to stay, but it is going to be an accepted phenomena. So basically, if you look at our disclosure platform, already about 590 plus investors use that information to make impactful decisions on investment. So if you speak in simple language, not corporate language, these are intelligent decisions on investment in water security, in climate impact, and also for preservation of forests. So ultimately, we are making good money decisions on how we are going to protect the environment. So basically, the disclosure platform is not just about the data that is available, but it's making the data available to people who matter, who are going to actually take decisions in terms of where they're going to engage with the right businesses so that we have a positive impact on environment. So that is one aspect. Then there is, of course, the businesses themselves. And as I said in the beginning, the businesses are beginning to realize that it is for their reputation that they will have to disclose. And when I say they have to disclose, it's also about understanding their business processes. So when you are disclosing, you're talking about your processes in production, your energy usage, and your waste management practices. So you're already revisiting these and thinking about innovation in terms of impacting the climate positively. So I think about 73% of the companies, about the 14,000 companies reported to us in 2021. And these companies, actually, about 73% of them said that they want to disclose because it's good for their reputation. And this is voluntarily said, which is because, the reputation matters. Today, we have we have a consumer base who is interested and is demanding sustainability. It's not just the investors, it's also the consumers. So that's one. The other aspect is, businesses realize that by disclosing, they also are on a path towards cost saving, because you're looking at energy efficiency, you're looking at several practices which are going to contribute to reducing your costs. So I think from that perspective, at least 1 out of 3 companies was saying that it's good business sense to disclose. And the third aspect which you talked about in terms of benchmarking, I think about 58% companies that disclosed to us said that it makes them competitive. By disclosure makes them competitive, which means they understand processes undertaken by other companies, and they also understand how you can actually achieve a better goal or standard in terms of your processes. So I think these are some of the areas in which the benchmarking helps, because because the data is publicly available, because investors are looking at one versus the other, the business community themselves want to to work against a benchmark. But I think the final aspect, which we do not talk as much, and Aditi did touch about it in terms of the policy, I think there is another aspect. This data can be a feedback mechanism for policy. So, in terms of achieving national goals, in terms of climate change, you are able to identify the good companies versus, the not so sustainable companies. So I think that also is something that has not been explored enough. And I think that also helps in the benchmarking, because policy begins to realize that there are certain sector or certain, certain parts of the corporate sector that can contribute to the policy. So I think this is the multi-stakeholder approach in terms of, how benchmarking helps in achieving climate action. Stop there.
Excellent. In fact, the fact that sustainability through benchmarking exercises and the like could actually come across as something that gives a competitive edge. I think that's something that definitely will kind of increase the interest, I would say, in the boardrooms, if not the fact that there's already a climate crisis. I mean, the climate crisis is in itself a good awakening point, but if it hasn't done it yet, then at least the competitive edge aspect should definitely wake them up enough. So, and in the long term, that's another aspect that they should be definitely looking at. And thanks for touching upon the policy bit. And probably because you brought it up on the policy front, and Dr. Divya Sharma, I'll come back to you. Talking of the same programs that you mentioned and introduced earlier, the RE100s, the EV100s, and the like, do you see them kind of driving any potential rewiring of enterprise-wide policies, as much as public policy could be an aspect that could be driven through them? Is there also potential for them to drive enterprise-wide policies, process changes, or behavioral changes also in the larger mix? Any thoughts on that front?
Yes, definitely. And I am happy you asked me this question, because I have some examples, and we are, I think, taking off a big way. Of course, because of the time that we are in, and Prarthana was just speaking about benchmarking and how companies are coming forward and how it makes business sense to them. We at Climate Group regularly engage with our members to tell their stories of impact for our yearly reports of our campaign, as I said. The increased visibility and transparency required of members allows them to truly lead by example on climate. And by benchmarking their ambition against their peers, demonstrating what's already possible for companies to achieve today, and sending a strong and unified message to the policymakers. So this is all, coming to reality now. It is all shaped in a way that it is possible to make some of these impactful statements and impactful experiences, translate them into policy asks, for example, and influence policy in some way. We also profile case studies from members that are leading this way and pioneering new approaches at scale. And scale of these operations is also an important concern, so to say, because we are talking about huge transition. And there are barriers. I would not, shy away from saying that there are challenges and barriers that are faced both at the policy level, which is internal policy of the businesses, as well as external policy, which is the public policy, as you said. But the benefit of the platform is also that these initiatives provide what they provide through these initiatives, the information and the examples that are coming up, they are pioneering, and others would follow suit. So I would like to give you some example here from our EV100 initiative. In just a year, the number of electric vehicles deployed by EV100 members has doubled from the last year itself, from 2020. And the total number of vehicles committed to be EV by 2030 as part of EV100 commitments has risen by 80%. So from 4.8 million from the current 1.6 million. So it's like a projection, which we definitely think is going to, work. As well as getting EVs on the roads, EV100 members, and this is the response to the second part of your question. EV100 members are also using their property portfolios, their offices, factories, and stores to build a network of charging infrastructure that supports their staff and customers to also make the switch to EVs. So it's not that they are just talking about official vehicles, EV transition of official vehicles, but they are putting in infrastructure, putting in that kind of messages that their employees and the supply chain partners can also avail this opportunity to transform into EVs and transition into electric. This, in my mind, is going above and beyond to help achieve the target that these companies are committed to, but also facilitating the mental and physical barriers to adopting electric vehicles. The other example is, and this is related to public policy, about our RE100 policy asks. So we have very recently launched RE100 policy framework to enable policy and regulatory environment towards 100% sourcing of renewable power in India. And this framework, it draws on a set of policy asks, providing a clear framework on what it will take to build on enabling policy and regulatory environment for 100% corporate adoption of renewable energy in the coming decade. And the policy framework has been developed by RE100 with support from selected CSOs and industry associations. So it's kind of a, a practitioners community that has been created, and we are using it to the benefit, so that it's as I said earlier, brings together both policy and the businesses together to understand what is mutually beneficial for both the parties, and also the overall goal of energy transition in India.
I think that's really encouraging. I mean, when with all the thoughts that I've heard across the table, there's so much of maturity that I think has happened over the years that we don't no longer have to really say there's not such an enabling ecosystem that will help transition. The ecosystem is there now. It's all about making that transition happen, and we are definitely at the top of the hour. And so I think we have a next panel ready to walk in. But whatever we've discussed in this panel is heartening enough to say that the relevance of sustainability reporting as the end goal and the process that goes through it, we've kind of managed to clearly bring out the fact that it is something that's got a very stable ecosystem to kind of leverage if you wanted to. So that's the message that I think we should all take back to the audience, and probably leave it there. So we'll probably have to wrap this panel up, and we'll see each other again in some other space. Thank you. Sadvika, over to you then.
Thank you. It was a really amazing discussion, and I'm sure by now the audience have understood the importance of sustainability reporting. It definitely plays a crucial role in keeping organizations on their toes and keeping them accountable, making sure that they have the right tools and they've set the right kind of achievable goals and targets. Like all the panelists mentioned, reporting is definitely here to stay, and it plays an irreplaceable role in climate action. I'd like to thank all the panelists for their valuable insight. Moving on to the next session. I'm sure you're all very well aware, sustainability fuels design, and likewise, design is essential for sustainability. This sustainability quest can help unearth several technological and organizational innovations with top and bottom line returns. So without further ado, let's call forth the final panel of the day, which will focus on the topic, sustainability is a design and innovation problem. I would like to welcome our first panelist, Ms. Shilpa Shree Nayar, Vice President, Digital Transformation and Data Management at Societe Generale Global Solutions Center. Ms. Nayak has over 15 years of experience as an innovation evangelist. In her last role, she was heading the Catalyst Corporate Accelerator. Welcome, ma'am. Next, we have Mr. Saravanan from Kmart, who heads the Technology Accelerator at Kmart Group Australia. He carries a passion for entrepreneurship and aims to instill it into the general society's DNA. We also have Mr. Gauri Shankar Paramashivam from Maersk. Mr. Paramashivam is heading the Maersk Accelerator for India and China. He is a strategic leader and a hands-on problem solver with diverse expertise in logistics, e-commerce, and banking. He actively thrives on innovation and technology transformation, driving startup partnerships for Maersk. Last but not least, we have Mr. Abhay Tandon, seasoned innovation and transformation leader, who is also an avid angel investor. He has over a decade of experience leading the innovation activities of top MNCs like Lowe's, Abinbev, and Target. To steer the discussion with our esteemed panelists, I would like to call upon Ms. Namrata Rana, Director Strategy and Brand, Futurescape. Ms. Rana's work focuses on preparing companies for the sustainability and net zero transition, and she'll be moderating this session. Over to you, Ms. Rana.
Thank you so much, Sadvika. It's wonderful to be here today with all of you. And my reason for talking about this topic is the fact that there is so much buzz around it. So everybody, right from countries to companies, are talking about the net zero transition, and they're saying that carbon emissions have to reduce. Now there is no two ways about it that those emissions need to reduce, but a lot of conversation is moving around the energy transition. So they're talking about the fact that renewable energy is the way to go, energy optimization is the way to go. There are some people that are talking about circularity. And so there are many, many conversations that are happening all at the same time. But my premise has been that sustainability is also a design and innovation problem. And that's because for many things, we are using the wrong materials. So for example, why are we using materials that last for hundreds of years for products that we perhaps consume just for a few minutes? Why is it that we are stuck in a cycle of high energy and high carbon emission transportation? And not just personal transportation, but logistics, moving things around, and the kind of unsustainable loops that have been created in terms of the way we grow things, the way we make things, and the way we ship things around. And when we talk about shipping, I have somebody here from Maersk who knows all about it. When we talk about financing the transition, there is Shilpa, Shree, who can talk us through the big challenges. And when it comes to innovation, there is Abhay Tandon to help us address many of these issues. But first, most importantly, the role of finance and what does it really mean for the net zero shift? Shilpa, over to you.
Thank you so much, Namrata. It was a very well delivered context. Thank you so much for setting the stage. So the biggest catalyst has been the banks and the financial institutions, right? We are the ones who fund large energy projects, big ticket financial transformations as well for the organizations. So I guess with ESG becoming more mainstream and at the core of a business strategy, it's no longer a CSR-driven initiative, but it is going to be at the core of every P&L making decision for any business that we will fund in the future. So that is one big foundational shift that has happened in the last couple of years. The second important shift has been around the regulatory changes as well. So even as a bank, even though we do not contribute directly to any carbon emissions, and earlier we were reporting our scope 1 emissions, which is controlled and owned by us, the biggest changes happened on the regulatory side, where we're also asked to report on scope 2 and scope 3 emissions. When I say scope 2 and scope 3, it is not the emissions owned by us, but by our suppliers, vendors, clients, and partners. So how do we, start for some of the emissions that we contribute by funding or financing certain activities? So with this new shift, there is definitely, I think, a need in the industry to look at alternative, alliances that can fund. And also, commitment of the organizations itself has also been a catalyst. So every organization, whether it is in the retail sector or the shipping sector, logistics, manufacturing units, everybody has committed for a net zero commitment, and the ambitions are quite lower than what we think it is. The ambitions, I guess, for most of the organization has been the 2050, and Society General also signed a climate, impact agreement, Paris Climate Impact Agreement, where we want to go towards a net zero carbon neutrality by 2050, right? And this is not just us, but I'm guessing all the major organizations have signed up a pact to be carbon neutral, to agree on not greenwashing in the reports, making sure the genuine commitment to reducing the carbon footprint of their transactions and activities without compromising the business or profitability. So with this huge aspirations, it is also a challenge as well as definitely an opportunity for the innovation and the startup ecosystems as well, because one side we have ambitions that is set. 2050 is the stage for most of the organization, but there is a huge gap from how we move from our current trend to where we want to be in 2050 or even 2040 in some scenarios. So startups are reacting to this gap today. So a lot of startups that we have come across, which are innovatively which are innovating on the solutions that the corporates cannot, quickly turn around. So especially, I guess there are startups which, are producing ink, let's say, from carbon emissions emitted out of automobiles and converting them into ink and utilities. This is a very innovative startup, right? And they're also converting these utilities for banks like us, I guess MasterCard has signed up with one such startup from India where they're producing the cards, the debit and the credit cards made out of this carbon particulate matter. And then there are startups who are addressing the $1 billion EV market. These are not coming from big corporates first. It is always trending from the startup ecosystem, and they are the ones who have the opportunity to innovate at the ground level. And a lot of startups are also looking at battery life cycle management, alternative powertrains. The opportunities are huge, and in every sector, right? Whether it is packaging industry, or it is just addressing the carbon emission industry, or it is just the way in which we can report the carbon footprint of employees, or drilling down to the activities as well. So we've also come up with a lot of European startups, right, in the last couple of years, where they're even tracking down the activities on your card statement. Let's say if you have your Netflix account, there is a certain carbon emission associated with each of this transaction. So at a person or an individual level, I think to start owning our emissions, not just the organization levels, and it is becoming everyone's problem. So this is where a whole lot of opportunities.
That's fascinating, Shilpa, and especially when you said that it's time to start owning our emissions.
Yes.
How do we actually own it? And it's not just one person's problem,
Yeah.
but everybody else's problem. Abhay,
Yeah.
would you agree with that? Do you think that startups and innovations that are happening in organizations are actually looking at it in this manner?
True. I mean, Shilpa made some very, very interesting and very on point points, right? They were really, really good and very meaningful in today's context, right? And when I look at these trends, from an innovation standpoint, I see, these cycles in two forms, right? There are two sides to the coin, right? One set of activities from an individual standpoint or from an organization standpoint, which are creating a very positive impact, and there's other side which is creating a lot of negative impact as well, right? From a positive standpoint, I see sustainable initiatives all around me today. Literally in the last 10 years, you see a major difference in how a common person perceives sustainability around themselves, right? So, for example, you look at automotive space, there's fierce competition from an EV standpoint, right? Today, there was a news around TVS acquiring a Swiss conglomerate, right? EV conglomerate. 2 weeks back, they had partnered with Swiggy to ensure that they are able to, kind of infuse their EVs into the Swiggy fleet, right? And Swiggy is not just doing that; they're also focusing on packaging, which is recyclable, which is more sustainable for consumers. And these consumers are then, making a lot of changes on the from the daily habits that they're developing, right? So, for example, consuming shoes from Neemhans. It's a startup which is producing consumer-friendly shoes, which are sustainable in nature, right? To products, cosmetic products from Wow Skin Naturals, and so on and so forth, right? So this chain continues. I have personally invested in 2 startups, both of which are focused on sustainable activities. One of them is creating paperless retail POS systems. Other is a D2C brand, which is focused on natural products for women healthcare and hygiene, right? And so I see that all around myself today, and that's fantastic to see, right? On the other hand, I also see some very interesting technology which is creating a negative impact as well, right? And this is something that is buzzing around in our ecosystem today, in the startup ecosystem, innovation ecosystem, which is decentralization, right? Because decentralization and blockchains are running through minting NFTs. NFTs is like all over the place today, right? And then you have mining the cryptos and so on and so forth, and that is consuming crazy amount of energy today, right? And there's a clear barter of energy for commercial gains, right? Of course, there's a lot of work going on by these consortiums to try and create Ethereum or Polygon or other chains to be more sustainable, right? To create different staking practices that are not so energy consuming. But these energy consuming practices are shaking energy grids across the globe right now, not just one location, but everywhere. And that is causing major problems, right? In the way we're looking at sustainability. So I'm seeing both these kind of trends. There are organizations which are trying to be more positive. There are individuals who are trying to be more positive towards sustainability, but then same individuals are also trying to create this commercial gains by selling NFTs, which is a good thing, but at the cost of mining and minting and using a lot of energy there, right? So I see both the sides there.
And the interesting part is that till about just 4 years back, it would not have occurred to us, or it would have occurred to a very few set of people to say what is the carbon impact of Bitcoin, right? People, it was not in the consideration set. Now all of a sudden we are realizing that when technology scales, right, we can't just look at scale, we've also got to look at the carbon footprint of things. Now we are all talking about moving into a 5G world, right? Everybody is talking about AR and VR. So what is going to happen to all the energy that will be required just for that technology? That is a very big challenging question. And the other side is that, while there are icons of, islands of change that are there, they haven't really scaled. So while we're talking about EVs, the percentage of EVs that is available is really small. And Shilpa was talking about the fact that, we need to own our emissions, and people are doing innovative things in cards for people to understand what their carbon footprint is. But how many people are really doing it? So there is a challenge of one, innovation, and then the second challenge is one of scale. And I think there are many problems in between that need to be solved for us to be truly sustainable. And therefore, perhaps this forum in NASSCOM is perhaps the best place for us to be and to talk about the fact that, there is much more that needs to be done around it. But there's one organization that seems to have solved the scale problem. That is Maersk. Gauri, would you like to weigh in on that?
That would be very positive for us to put it that way, Rana, but we are definitely extremely committed towards that journey. Yes, we are trying to get it solved, and we are aspiring towards coming up with a pretty strong commitment around it. Like Shilpa was pointing out, right? So a lot of organizations together, we agreed on a pact that, okay, 2050 is when we go carbon neutral. Even prior to that, Maersk set out a target saying that every year we cut down our emission by at least a minimum of 5% incrementally. Today, start of this year, we were able to confidently put out our neck in the line saying that, okay, we're going to revise that target and say that we're going to go carbon neutral in 2040, almost a decade in advance, which means that, from the time we made that commitment, we've constantly made strides of efforts towards that. Interesting fact, Namrata, is that you spoke about the amount of EVs, right? There's a stat which often surprises me. About 100 years back, we had 1% of electric cars, it seems. About 100 years back, when cars were just invented. Even today, it is still 1% is the stats, right? So, and it happens that we haven't figured out the infra that supports any kind of innovation very often, right? And it's not that Maersk was all along that we were always smart about this. We stumbled through multiple barriers when we were trying to go through this journey. For example, when we initially started addressing the sustainability problem, we started by saying that, okay, we're going to contribute to reducing the food wastage, and we ran a couple of sprints with a lot of startups, and that's when we started our initial investments in the startup landscape as a corporate venture company. And then from there on, we realized that we also need to look at the logistics as the overall business, as an integrator, like how each of these companies, like, retail and banking systems, all of these people are focusing on scope 2 and scope 3 emission impacts. It naturally becomes a responsibility as a logistics partner to ensure that the value chain is kept green all along, right? It is not just about them to ensure it's right, for us also to confirm that as a customer, your value chain remains green across the process. In that reference, we said, okay, we're going to look at autonomous electro trucks. And we made an investment in a company called Enride, which is focusing on that area. And now, after almost 3 years in this journey, we realized that decarbonization does not just come up with the idea of electric ships or ships that run on biofuel. It is also about figuring out how those supply is going to be managed. I don't want to put the exact numbers, but a ship to transport a day, a Panamax vessel to move a day, it costs thousands of gallons of fuel. And today we have a structured supply chain for that to happen on a fossil fuel. We know how to get a bunker diesel to support that. But tomorrow, when I say that I'm going to have a methanol vessel, do I know where to procure those many, millions of gallons that can support my fleet across the globe? And that became a question for us itself. And now today we've put out an order request to Hyundai, where we are manufacturing 8 methanol vessels, biofuel vessels, which operate primarily after realizing how that supply can be managed, how those 8 vessels can be fed as they float in the market. So last year alone, we made 3 different corporate investments on biofuel companies like Vertora, Waste Fuel, Prometheus. These are some large ticket investments trending about $20 million or so, where we made investment just to ensure that we are nurturing the infrastructure that will support a greener transport or logistics in different areas of focus, not just about ship, but also about every other area where we are going to touch about a biofuel or an alternative fuel. You need to ensure that the suppliers are prepped towards that. And that's probably the direction that we are taking in right now. We've also kept our hands full in terms of looking at the ship recycling and how we are able to manage even the employees' footprint in terms of the carbon. So I recently met a startup named Clameder, which is a Danish startup. They go down to the level of measuring your personal impact or carbon emissions as an individual. Very simple habitual changes. You use that app, it tells you, okay, today you managed to create so much impact on the environment. So we are trying to see how those kind of technologies can be brought into our understanding as well. So that's where Maersk is heading into. It is a large, challenging journey, but we are actually making some very good strides towards that. Is how I see it.
Thank you so much, Gauri. Shilpa, I want to understand from your point of view, how can problems be converted into opportunities? Because as you can see, there is a large amount of investments that is going into these startups. Some of them are small, some of them are medium sized, some of them are struggling with the challenges of scale. But yet at the same time, the problems that we see around us don't really seem to be getting solved, right? So we can
Yes.
see the movement, but we can't really see the light.
Absolutely. I guess this is a large challenge at all of our hands, right? At every sector, like I mentioned before. And the fact that there is an ambition and the fact that there is a scope, and we are nowhere closer to what we can achieve in 2050 itself is an opportunity. So as Gauri also rightly pointed out, it is not just moving on to electric vehicles, but creating the infrastructure needed. The alternative powertrains that I just mentioned is going to really make a difference. So I was also told that just by moving to electric vehicles does not reduce your carbon footprint, but on the contrary, it increases the carbon footprint of an organization, mainly because the energy source for most of these EVs are still traditional. So how do we counter this problem of making sure that there is a necessary infrastructure that can accompany us in this journey of, making sure that we have achieved our net zero alliance, right? So there is this huge gap of, the necessary infrastructure that needs to be secured. Also innovations that can happen even in the packaging materials. I have seen, the likes of Zomato and Swiggy, where they mentioned that they are doing climate conscious delivery. So that doesn't mean that they're actually, reducing the carbon footprint in any way, but they've just made sure that for every delivery, they go and plant a tree somewhere else, right? So, which is, yes, it does lead to carbon neutrality, but in other words, I think this will still not be acceptable in the next few years, because you also have to take certain measures in which you can come up with solutions or alternatives which will, impact your direct, contribution to sustainability challenges. So with that, I guess a lot of this, areas remains to be solved. How can they, solve the whole logistic problem? Can they come up with reusable containers for, delivery, for instance? This is a problem that nobody has addressed yet. And I also came across a startup in Canada. I guess I forget the name. I think they were called Rebalance. I could be wrong, but yeah. So they also take care of containers that we use, or in our day-to-day life, such as shampoos, conditioner, toothpaste. These are a lot of one-time use, packaging. How can we reduce this? Can we also come up with sustainable containers where we can go and just pick up shampoo, for the month in a reusable container that I can keep for the next whole year. And there is a logistic partner who can also come and pick up these containers, deliver the containers as per my requirement. So this is a larger problem which is at hand that nobody wants to touch, but this is also an opportunity because somebody has to, somebody has to, bell the cat, right, in the coming few years. And this is definitely an opportunity for every single startup out there who are looking at getting into the sustainability space for sure.
Thank you so much. Shilpa, Abhay, would you like to weigh in for somebody who's actually invested in startups and sustainability? What do you see as the opportunities and the big challenges in finding startups that are actually innovating? And how is it that we can actually build on the innovation ecosystem?
Sure. Thanks, Namrata. And I just wanted to kind of bring this point there that I think Swiggy is doing reusable containers. They're doing a beta with reusable containers, right? So it's not that they're not picked it up. They have picked it up, and it's gradually being rolled out, right? And people are looking at what kind of a carbon footprint are they leaving with that methodology? Because now there's reverse logistics involved as well, right? So every solution is creating some more problems, and that's where design and innovation together can really solve for some of these problems, right? And Shilpa also correctly pointed out about packaging and packaging innovation, right? And these are some of the things that I've been thinking about, or I've been lucky to be part of organizations who have been also doing some of these things. For example, when I was at AB InBev, a couple of things that strike in the top of my mind. One was the packaging innovation, where the packaging around most of the beers made sure that they did not utilize any plastic there, right? So that was very interesting in the way they kind of went about the whole packaging bit as well as the whole execution or the logistic bit of that as well, right? Second thing that I saw was, and I think by the next 2 years they would hit this target, all the Budweiser breweries across the globe, and Budweiser is probably one of the biggest selling brands in the world today, are all running on solar energy as well as wind energy, right? So a lot of these transformations are happening. Sometimes there's a lot of PR around this, sometimes there's not, right? Sometimes people are still waiting to talk about some of these results till the time they're sure that this is scalable to a certain extent, right? I've also seen at Lowe's, right, we're working on a product ourselves. We're trying to build this product out where we were trying to utilize rice straws as a substrate to grow mycelium and creating a thermal insulation panel. Now, these thermal insulation panels in US, Canada, Europe, everywhere are across every home, right? And, their heat insulation, capacity is very limited or moderate, right? So we're trying to recreate a product in a sustainable way, right? And these rice straws that we were using as substrate are basically burnt in Punjab and Haryana, and they cause a lot of this pollution every year, right? So we were trying to utilize that. The whole product is natural, it is biodegradable. And we were trying to see if this has potentially a stronger heat insulation coefficient, right? Thereby making it a much better product, much more reasonable and biodegradable, right? Which is better for the consumers, right? And both these points, right, from a packaging standpoint to this particular product, there's one thing that links them, which is landfills, right? It's crazy how India has become, or some of these countries, including India, has become one of the biggest landfill problems, landfill dumping grounds for the world, right? And it's a huge problem today that we're trying to deal with, right? And from a corporate standpoint, I've also heard that Amazon has their resales entity whose vision is that, there should be no landfills by 2050. So, and that is how the resales, whole organization around circular, kind of circular economy there came into Amazon from the e-commerce standpoint. So there's a lot of work going on in different organizations. Not every vision is coming out externally. They're still doing a lot of these pilots and POCs before this innovation hits production, right? And in my opinion, right, we have spoken about this in this conversation as well as the previous conversation, previous panel as well, about reporting and benchmarking. And I think this is super important for organizations because it is not just a luxury that, they have to, participate in that and, look good in front of the consumers or investors, but it's a need of the hour, right? So they have to mandatorily report these KPIs across across these consortiums or symposiums, etc., so that they're tracked effectively, right? And they're supposed to be charged if they're not doing it right? And the same thing happens with individuals as well. I mentioned this earlier as well. As individuals, we're making a lot of conscious decisions today But then how do we get ourselves to be motivated to take more conscious decisions, right? Can we create those kind of mechanisms in place which makes us more motivated to go green, to be more sustainable in our daily
But
choices?
how can that happen? Because people only do things when they think that it drives value for them or their organization, right? And
So
tell me.
no, I was just saying that the value creation is all about having the value creation in your head, right? Sometimes it's not even tangible. It's about when you look at gaming, right? And you're talking about scoring, right? People want to compete and be on top of the game, right? Because you have earned virtual currency, which means nothing in the real world, or maybe it may mean in the future in metaverse, but right now it means nothing. So
Right.
but people still want to compete and be there on top, right? And that's where some kind of mechanism to motivate folks at an individual level could be created, and that's definitely a challenge that people should solve for.
Thank you so much, Abhay. I want to call on everybody to give their closing remarks. We need to end soon. So, Gauri, first you, then Shilpa, and then back to you, Abhay. If you can just, conclude, give your concluding thoughts on the topic, that would be really nice. Gauri, over to you.
Thanks for that, Namrata. I think the panel clearly highlighted how this issue is being dealt with right now, right? So, and one key call out that I would probably specify here is that very often that we see innovation as a side gig, or the moment you hear design and innovation from a large corporate, we always see it as a team of 10 members sitting in a corner trying to solve something, which is probably never meant to solve immediately. It'll happen in about a decade's time. I think that scene has to change significantly when you're trying to bring up problems like sustainability on your front face, right? And adoption in scale at scale is a huge importance to the whole thing, right? Yes, there are amazing pilots. A lot of times, for example, we did see a lot of good innovations in packaging that we keep seeing as internet videos, right? And we would be amused to say that sooner or later this is going to come to me in my own package at my home, which is not going to happen very soon because the adoption is not happening at scale. So if we are able to push these two items, saying that okay, design and innovation takes a front seat whenever it comes to delivering path-breaking solutions, it is not just about a side gig, and bringing in adoption in scale is going to be a huge differentiator for us to take this ahead. So that's my 2 cents in this whole topic here.
Thank you so much. Shilpa, over to you.
Thanks. So I guess my closing comments would be, change has to begin with us as an individual, us as an employee, and then it sort of also, translates into the organization's goals as well. So at least in SocGen, CSR is one of the core, objective areas for all the employees across the group. And, one of the mandate is CSR is in our DNA. And we have to make those conscious choice where we have to reduce the carbon footprint as an employee, as an individual, make those choices. Sometimes it's tough, maybe just go hyper local, commute less, make sure that instead of sending heavy attachments, for instance, in your day-to-day work, you can start using OneDrive as a practice. These are small changes but has a significant impact on the organization as well as the overall environment, right? So I guess the change definitely is with us, and we have to start looking at this as a personal problem rather than an organization's problem.
Thank you so much. So Gauri talked about the fact that we need to get the timeline closer to us rather than some far point in the future. Shilpa, you talked about the fact that we need to take ownership and the change begins with us. Abhay, what do you think?
I think I agree with both the points. I think I maybe just able to add the same point that I said earlier as well. That when you look at plastic ban, right, this was not necessarily motivating to all individuals, but individuals were fined if they did not comply with that ban, right? So you have to figure out strategies, from a short-term standpoint, which includes compliance, very strict compliance, be it organizations or be it individuals. But the long-term solution for innovating in this space is not just compliance, it's actually about motivation. So I think the bigger challenge right now would be how do we motivate enough or expose people enough to the problems that are being created without them knowing about the problems that globe is facing today, or all of us are facing today, if we can expose them and motivate them to solve for this, then the individual change that Shilpa spoke about will these drops will make the ocean, right? So that's the change that I'm talking about from a long-term standpoint.
Very well said, Abhay. Thank you so much. And on that note, I'd like to conclude this session. It's been my pleasure to be here with you today, and I've learned a lot from all of you. And I'm sure so has the audience. Thanks a ton. Sadhvika, over to you. Bye.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you. And thank you so much to the panel for that eye-opening session. Yes, definitely sustainability is not black or white, and it's essential to innovate and come up with what works best for each individual business given their value chain, their strengths, weaknesses, and using innovation and scalability. And it's also crucial to note that sustainability is not just an elaborate show of social responsibility, but can also provide financial benefits and help create industry leaders, provided it is approached in the right way. So thank you, panelists. And we have reached the end of today's session on ESG, sustainability, the savvy way. I personally have learned a great deal today, and it's been an incredible opportunity listening to such significant leaders of their field talk about sustainability. I can't wait to see what the forthcoming decade of action would bring with such influential people at the helm. I sincerely hope that you, dear audience, have had an equally enriching experience. Thank you so much and good evening.